David Walliams is one of Britain's most successful comics and entertainers. He burst onto the scene in 2003 with the hugely successful TV series Little Britain, which he wrote with his longtime comedy partner Matt Lucas, as well as the later comedy series Come Fly With Me. He became a judge on one of ITV's biggest shows, Britain's Got Talent, in 2012, and he is a best-selling children's author, having sold more than 50 million copies worldwide. But his career has been far from plain sailing, and has been marred by a series of controversies. Amongst them are allegations that his comedy is exploitative, that he relies on cruelty, abuse and racist stereotypes. He has been criticised for exposing men on stage, some of them teenage boys as young as 16, and making crude, sexual, explicit remarks about teenage boys and other male celebrities. Sketches from his comedy shows have been pulled and erased from history, following criticisms of the frequent use of blackface and stereotypes of disabled people, black people and gay people. And he sensationally lost his job on Britain's Got Talent, following leaked audio which revealed him making rude, explicit and derogatory sexual remarks about a contestant. But despite all of this, he remains a huge star in Britain, and it seems his success is set to continue. So what then do these many controversies really tell us? How can society now be outraged by Little Britain, a show that just 10 years ago was watched by millions? Have we become a society that is obsessed with cancel culture? Have we become a society that has lost the ability to laugh at itself? And therefore, do these many controversies really say more about us than him? Or have recent high-profile celebrity scandals made us now see famous people in a different light? It is a fascinating and at times disturbing story. So let's dive into the many controversies of David Walliams. So let's start with the programme that catapulted Walliams to fame, Little Britain. Little Britain was a comedy sketch show that aired between 2003 and 2006 on the BBC. The show was written and performed by Walliams and Matt Lucas, and consisted of sketches involving exaggerated parodies of British people from various walks of life. The series was a huge success, receiving nearly 10 million viewers at its peak and entering popular culture. But despite its massive popularity, the show wasn't without controversy. Top of the list are allegations that the show was outright racist and portrayed minority groups in an offensive and derogatory fashion. In particular, the show and the later follow-up Come Fly With Me made extensive use of blackface. Both Walliams and Lucas donned blackface frequently in the series. Embracing stereotypes, exaggerated accents and mannerisms, they portrayed a series of black and other ethnic minority characters. Many would have thought that the use of blackface in television had stopped in 1972, when the black and white minstrel show was cancelled for its racist premise and content. And so it's quite extraordinary that 30 years later, the BBC would commission a brand new show that made extensive use of blackface and played on racial stereotypes. But it wasn't just blackface. A huge amount of the show's content involved gags rooted in racism. Let's take a look at some of this alleged racism. One of the show's running gags involved character Marjorie Dawes not being able to understand an Indian woman.
Mary.
Fish and chips.
Sorry, do it again.
Fish and chips.
Do it again.
Fish and chips.
Do it again.
Oh, forget it.
Must be some sort of dish that we don't get over here. Okay, so how can we eat the food we crave?
Another involved characters eating food, who would violently vomit when they discovered that the food had been made by someone who wasn't white.
Oh, delicious. Did you make these?
No, Anisha did.
No. Maggie, please. She's just a child.
Did you make them yourself?
Yes.
You must give me the recipe.
Well, actually, it's one of Ainsley Harriot's.
Actually, my mother made it. Let me get you some tea.
Oh, no, Maggie, please. I've just had the carpet shampooed.
Another sketch involved Walliams describing a man in a turban as Ali Bongo.
You know, Steve, he's got a beard, quite tall. Have you ever seen It Ain't Half Hot, Mum? No. Well, looks like he's just stepped out of the shower. Think Carmen Miranda without the fruit. That's right, Ali Bongo. How can I describe him? He's got straight black hair, yellowish skin, slight smell of soy sauce. That's it, the Ching Chong Chinaman.
Another Asian character who looked like this was called Ting Tong. And it doesn't stop there. Look at the series Come Fly With Me and how they portrayed Asian and other characters. Just a reminder, this aired in 2010. At the time, the show received thousands of complaints from viewers who found the use of blackface at the very least uncomfortable. What all this amounts to is a series that more or less based a huge amount of its content on racial stereotypes, and it's undeniable that many people find these sketches difficult to watch now. Of course, others would argue that Little Britain played on stereotypes of all people, including many white characters, and therefore claims of racism are simply rubbish. They say that the jokes are not on the ethnic minority characters, but instead we are laughing at the ridiculous stereotypes and reactions and the statements from the other characters. Some say that we've simply lost our sense of humour, that as a society we've become obsessed with being woke. After all, it's just comedy, it's not meant to be taken seriously. But it appears that's not what David Walliams and Matt Lucas now think. In 2017, Lucas said, "If I could go back and do Little Britain again, I wouldn't make those jokes, I wouldn't play black characters. Basically, I wouldn't make that show now." Walliams also said he would definitely do it differently in today's cultural landscape. In 2020, the BBC and Netflix cancelled Little Britain from its streaming platforms for the extensive use of blackface and its deemed racist content. Walliams said, "Once again, we want to make it clear that it was wrong, and we are very sorry. We regret that we played characters of other races." The series has now been restored with the scenes involving blackface edited out. Look, it would be unfair to lay the blame at the feet of Walliams and Lucas. After all, the BBC as a whole is responsible for its content, not just those two comedians. And hundreds of people worked on the show, let alone the millions of people who watched and loved it at the time. And again, the show is just a comedy, it's not meant to be taken seriously. But it is undeniable, watching it back now, that whether deliberately or not, the show relies heavily on racial stereotypes, which are, at the very least, uncomfortable. And it leads you to wonder whether this material is in fact saying something about the nature and character of the creators of the show. Why is their chosen comedy so cruel? Why is there so much racism? Why is it so exploitative? But Little Britain is just the beginning of one of the controversies, and the next one is perhaps the most disturbing and serious of all. As part of the Little Britain live tour in 2006, Walliams performed a Hide the Sausage sketch, which involved him portraying a sex offender named Des K, who invites young men and teenagers up from the audience to play a game with him. The sketch then includes Walliams groping and manhandling the men and teenagers live on stage, attempting to kiss them, pulling their trousers down and simulating sex with them in front of the audience.
One of the most extreme sketches in Little Britain Live involves a fading children's TV star called Des K and a game of Hide the Sausage. Across Australia, Des will be taking audience participation to a new limit at the expense of its male youth.
Onto the stage, come on, onto the stage, come on. There we go, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hello there.
And how old are you, Will?
18.
And how old are you, Garo?
17.
And how old are you, Daniel?
16.
Bingo.
You're a big boy for 16, aren't you, eh? That's what I'll tell the judge.
Tell me this, Daniel. Do you have a favourite colour?
Blue.
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 Oh. Come on, Taylor, relax. You're with your Uncle Des. See? See? See?
Don't look to your mum and dad. They can't help you now. Okay.
you hiding it? Is the sausage hidden?
Oh, Reese got it. It's over there. There it is. Will. Hey, give it to me, Will. Give it to me. Give it to me. Reese, what are you doing?
You just get to see someone's head going, this does not compute. I should not be fighting to cut my genitals on stage, and I paid money to come here.
We don't want to see it. Will! We don't want to see it.
Very nice. So I think that's the optimum. A glimpse of ours. Simulate the buggery and up.
Yeah, I love cruelty. It's my favourite thing in the world.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally kissed your bottom. I apologise.
It didn't start off like that. It kind of grew. You know, as I became greedy for laughs.
Did you enjoy that?
In a way.
But you've got to know the boundaries. I mean, that's funny, but if I started, you know, exposing their penis or something, it would not, I don't know, it would just be horrible then. It would just be abuse.
Just a reminder, this is a 40-year-old man groping a 16-year-old boy on stage in the name of comedy. In 2006, Walliams performed the sketch during the Little Britain Comic Relief Gala at the Hammersmith Apollo. Participants included comedian David Baddiel, musician Mark Ronson, and English actor Jeremy Edwards, whose genitals were exposed to more than 3,000 people live in the audience. Take a look at the sketch involving Mark Ronson and see if you can see how uncomfortable Ronson looks. Looking back, you can clearly see how uncomfortable Mark Ronson is. And it's difficult to see these sketches as anything but comedy. Some, in fact, see this as sexual assault, in plain sight, live on stage. After the event, Walliams was reported to have said, "When I put my mind to it, I have the strength of 10 men, so there's no stopping me." During the documentary about the tour, Walliams reads a letter that he claims was written by a victim of sexual abuse, who criticises the Des K character.
David is handed a letter from a fan who'd seen the previous night's show and failed to see the funny side of Des K.
No, it's a letter of complaint. But it's actually a bit serious. Somebody's saying they've been sexually molested and they think the Des K character's too far.
Really?
Well, tell us. Dear Mr. Williams, I was shocked, dismayed and disappointed by the character Des K, whose selection of a victim and consequent molestation of the boy seemed a great joke. For me, this was not a joke. For me, it went too far. I was molested when I was very young, 3 years. One can rationalise this is all right to expose the truth, however, it can have a downside as people laugh, think it's funny, but may give further licence to those perpetrators who think that molestation of boys, girls or adults is all right. I may be wrong. Everyone else laughed, didn't they? Who am I to judge? It's a strong letter.
Would you reply to that?
Yeah, there is an address actually. I suppose, you know, if it was a child, it wouldn't be funny, but because it's an adult and we're on stage, to me, there are no subjects that you can't make jokes out of. Because if you make that line, then you have to get rid of all comedy. Because you have to say that, you know, there's no point. The comedy can only do this, this, and this, and therefore you might as well not have it.
There can be no doubt that Walliams didn't know how controversial this was at the time. In his 2017 autobiography, Matt Lucas wrote that Walliams would often be confronted backstage by those he had just groped, and they sometimes reacted with violence. He was punched several times by victims or their families. Looking back, these so-called comedy sketches are not just a product of their time. They are deeply inappropriate and disturbing. Imagine that's you on stage, or your son or your brother. How would you feel? And again, what does all this say about David Walliams? We've established so far that he has built a lot of his comedy career on racial stereotypes and cruel comedy. And now he's exposing men and teenagers, some as young as 16, on stage. The controversies don't end there. In 2016, Walliams found himself under fire for making, you guessed it, a crude sexual remark about the then newly discovered singer Harry Styles, who was just 17 years old at the time. While not illegal, most people will find a 40-year-old man making sexual comments about a 17-year-old boy inappropriate, to say the least. Perhaps surprisingly, given his style of humour and many controversies, Walliams is a prolific children's author, and has also found his books under fire. One of his stories about a Chinese boy called Brian Wong, who was never wrong, was removed from his books after criticism that it contained lazy stereotypes of Chinese people. Meanwhile, others have found it uncomfortable that one of Walliams' books, aimed at children, contained a reference to page 3 girls. In one book, he writes that Mr. Spud handed an envelope to his son without taking his eyes off the girl on page 3. Again, these are books for children. But next was an even bigger controversy still to come. In 2012, Walliams became a judge on Britain's Got Talent, one of the UK's biggest shows. He was a hit with viewers and was awarded the Best Judge Award at the National Television Awards many times. He was so popular that he stayed on the show for 10 years. But in 2022, it all came to a dramatic end, following a leaked recording of Walliams which heard him making, you guessed it, inappropriate sexual and derogatory remarks about contestants. His comments were picked up by microphones between takes. In one recording, he is heard using the C word 3 times to describe a pensioner who had entered the show as a contestant. Another incident occurred after a female contestant auditioning on the show had walked off the stage. When her performance was over, Walliams was recorded as saying, "She's like the slightly boring girl you meet in the pub that thinks you want to fuck them, but you don't." He continues, "She thinks you want to fuck her, but you don't. I know, I was saying she thinks you want to fuck her, but you don't. It's the last thing on your mind, but she's like, yep, I bet you do. No, I don't. I had a bit of a but now it's gone. It's shriveled up inside my body." Psycho Entertainment issued a statement following this, which said Britain's Got Talent is a family show, and we do not condone the use of any such language. Walliams himself issued a half-hearted apology. He said, "I would like to apologise to the people I made disrespectful comments about during breaks in filming for Britain's Got Talent in 2020. These were private conversations, and, like most conversations with friends, were never intended to be shared. Nevertheless, I am sorry." Talk about trying to gaslight people in an apology. Following the incident, his contract with the show was not renewed, and he lost his job. He subsequently sued the production company for misuse of his private data. Walliams was accusing the company of causing him psychiatric harm and financial loss. They settled out of court. Since then, Walliams has continued his showbiz career by now appearing on Australia's Got Talent and comedy panel shows. He also continues to release more children's books and is set to continue a career in the spotlight. So, where does all of this leave us? Well, despite being one of Britain's biggest comedians and best-selling authors, Walliams' career has been marred with a series of controversies. And there appears to be a thread that runs through nearly all of them. Lazy, racial stereotyping, cruel humour which exploits others, and inappropriate, derogatory and sexual remarks, which leaves a complicated and at sometimes disturbing picture. It's therefore perhaps surprising that he should be one of the best-selling children's authors in Britain. Looking back at it all, maybe we are all too woke now. Maybe we've become obsessed with cancel culture and political correctness. Maybe we've lost our sense of humour and can't take a joke. Or maybe We are now seeing David Walliams' true character and humour for what it really is. Only you can be the judge.